Greetings, everyone. This is John Contouris, and you are listening to the latest edition of Greek News on Demand. Greek News on Demand. This show is based off of my news website, GreekNewsOnDemand.com. That's one word, GreekNewsOnDemand.com. I am a Greek American journalist. I appear both on Greek radio and Greek TV in both the United States and in Greece. I'm very well known by Greek communities, both here in the United States and in Greece, because of the work that I've been doing for Greece the past couple of years or more now. One of the TV shows that I've been appearing on is called Greek Voice with Angelo Angelatos from Florida. They are the biggest Greek TV station in North America, and they're very well known by the Greek media back in Greece. I also appear from time to time, at least once a month, roughly, on the biggest Greek radio network worldwide. It's called Halas FM out of New York, Halas FM. So I am involved with mainstream news media, no doubt. I mean, I did start off back in December of 2008 with CNN, oddly enough. And that was a real watershed moment for Greece, because back then I had covered the events around the death of a young boy by the name of Alexis Grigoropoulos, who was shot to death by the police on a dark and mysterious and gloomy December night, just about a month after the elections, where Obama was elected president for the first time. And CNN needed a reporter, so I basically became the reporter, and we ended up doing 5 live interviews, both on TV and on their online TV station network channel. So basically, that's what started me on my journey, being an activist, an author, and of course a journalist. Now, at that time, oddly enough, CNN allowed me to speak boldly about the truth about what was going on in Greece at that time. But see, it would be a year later where the official Greek crisis would actually start. But strangely enough, at that time, about a year prior to the onset of the Greek crisis, I had said on CNN International, how that the Greek people were going through a crisis, and basically they needed the love and the support and, of all the nations out there, because, Greece offered everything to the Western world. They also needed the U.S. government to get off their back and stop meddling in their politics, as they've been doing for decades, by limiting the power and the potential of the Greek nation over and against that of Turkey's. Because as we all know, the Greek government, or actually the American government, has severely hampered Greece's progress as a nation over the past several decades with Henry Kissinger's policies. And they have preferred a strong Turkey over and against a weak Greece. Turkey has been used as the boogeyman, basically, to keep Greece in check. And that's precisely what's going on now, okay, which I'll get into a little bit later. But back then I had said all that. And, of course, CNN, they didn't pull the strings on. They didn't, they didn't pull the plug on me. They kept me going for 5 interviews. And they were very successful. And that just goes to show you can be a truth teller and get on TV, the mainstream news media, and speak the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there's a bunch of crazy people out there that, particularly on the Greek side, that think that because I've been dealing with the mainstream news media, I must be some type of estranged agent, double agent, something of that sort, and that I work for the CIA and all that kind of crazy crap. I remember back last year, April 2016, I appeared on a top Greek journalist's program in Greece. And after I gave him my resume, and after I gave him this whole spiel on, the powers that be planning another economic collapse and how they're involving Greece in it, after I had got off the program, the guy kept talking about our subject, but he also kept talking about me, saying that, I knew too much, and I kind of seemed like a CIA agent to him. Anyway, but that's just how we Greeks are in general. We're a little paranoid, and we're very, very conspiratorial-minded, but it takes us to the point of, utter insanity sometimes, where we get paranoid about everything and everyone, thinking that they're tied in with the CIA. I think you kind of understand what I mean there. But, so, I started with CNN, and I hope to get back on the big networks soon, CNN, Fox, Al Jazeera, you name it, because my whole goal is to get the message out to the English-speaking world about what Greece has gone through. And it's time that the world finds out what Greece has gone through, because they're not telling us, they haven't been telling us about what Greece has been going on, what has actually been going on in Greece, because what's been going on in Greece is a major, major conspiracy and cover-up, okay? And it had nothing to do with, a bulging Greek debt and Greeks who like to retire in their 30s or 40s or, malfeasance or this or that. Yes, there's government corruption. Yes, the politicians are traitors. But this is a more general, wider plan for the powers that be to destroy the Greek people and their heritage, because we Greeks are the light of the world. We've offered everything, at least to the Western world. Everything you can name, think of. The language that you speak is all based on Greek. And the words that are German and French origin, guess what? Those came from Greek too. I've written a whole book on this, by the way. It's called Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization by John Contouris. Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization by John Contouris. You can find that on Kindle, Amazon's Kindle. I have another book, too. It's called Hellenic Crisis by John Contouris. Hellenic Crisis by John Contouris. And there you're going to find out all the details about just what really has been going on in Greece. And really, all the money, basically, that the Greece has been getting from this whole bailout program, which we call the memorandum from the Troika, was all designed as a way to take this money, let the Greek banks eat it all up, which they have, steal a lot of it, which they have. They put it in offshore bank accounts, and we have total proof of this. And a lot of this money was sent to pay off Greek banks' debts toward German and French banks, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you heard that correctly. German and French banks basically use this as a way to get the Greek banks to pay off their debts. And, this is really a scam that was crafted by the Troika, which is the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to screw the Greek people, to destroy them, and also to pay off their debts, their banks' debts, foreign banks' debts, as I just mentioned, but also as a way to steal Greece's natural resources, okay? To rob Greece of their natural resources, because their natural resources, ladies and gentlemen, have been put as collateral on the debt, basically, that they now owe, quote unquote, to the Troika. Okay? So, Greece right now owes something like $20 billion to the IMF and something like $210 billion to the European Central Bank and other EU member nations, because EU member nations basically have put money in the pot, okay? So the Greek, and, you know, there's a lot of means, you know, by which they're trying to, you know, get this paid off. And I'll give you some quick examples. Right now, the IMF, as I believe I said in my previous broadcast, is considering a plan to dump Greece, kick Greece to the curb, and they are discussing this with Donald Trump and his government. They're telling Trump, get rid of Greece. They're not worth it. Their debt is unsustainable. And, you know, the fund should not give Greece any more support, which they haven't actually for about 3 years now. Oh, and by the way, Trump, tell them we want our $20 billion back. This is how these jerks, these psychopaths, these animals from Germany and Holland, two countries which have legalized, ladies and gentlemen, pedophilia and bestiality. I kid you not, look it up. They have the audacity to treat the Greeks that way, who have offered everything to the Western world. Art, science, math, everything. These beasts who became civilized by the Greeks, okay? It was because of the Greek Christian Byzantine Empire that these people became civilized. Now, of course, they're not civilized anymore because they're completely sold out to utter disgusting filth and to all the high ideals, quote unquote, of the European Union and so on and so forth, okay? So these animals have the audacity to talk this way about us, to us. And the Euro group leader, Jeroen Dijsselbloem from Holland, another animal, basically just said yesterday that if the IMF decides to pull out of Greece, then guess what? Holland and its support will pull out too. I mean, these people who have raped and robbed Greece now don't give a flying you-know-what for Greece, and they want to pull out, and they want to take off basically with all the spoils. Now, I'm going to get into also this huge super privatization fund, okay, that has been formed by which to privatize all of Greece's public assets with, ladies and gentlemen, multinational companies, which are tied in, of course, with the Troika. And they're going to basically now sell off, which it's already been in the process, but they're going to sell off Greek public assets to pay back the Greek debt. Okay? This is utterly insane. It's not necessary. And it's all based on several different factors. One of them, of course, is the fact that, the Greek debt is too big, it's unsustainable. How are the Greeks going to pay us off? Well, let's just mortgage off their assets. Well, I feel like telling these a-holes, excuse me for the expression, that, you know, according to the original IMF charter, the IMF was founded back, of course, during the Bretton Woods Agreement years ago. Greece was one of the founding members. Greece, over the years, put millions and millions and millions of dollars into it. Greece was secured a very low interest rate, something like 0.1%, okay, very low interest rate, to lend money at any time, its own money. Greece still, of course, today has tons of money in it, billions and billions of dollars, which they're not letting us access. The IMF, though, did not keep their original agreement with Greece. And that's why today, decades later, they've decided to screw Greece, to rape and rob Greece. Now, the IMF wasn't always this predatory. And what I'm about to show you is basically a clip of an interview that James Tucker gave to Alex Jones back in 2009. This is about a few years before James Tucker passed away. He was a very well-known journalist from the American Free Press. And that year, 2009, which of course was the watershed year for Greece, that's the year that the economic crisis started. That year, it just so happened that the Bilderberg Group meeting was taking place in Greece that year, in a district outside of Greece, in a hotel called Vouliagmeni. It's a very famous area in Greece. That's where former President Obama was, ladies and gentlemen, when he just visited Greece this past November. And, of course, they had locked down all of Athens just for that idiot's visit in Greece. We're talking about a total corrupt bastard who decides to visit Greece a month or two before the end of his presidency. He finally remembered Greece after 8 years. Gee, how nice of him. And so what does he do? He goes there and he, parrots the same BS American Western line of propaganda for Greece. He tells them, basically, we're not doing crap about Turkish-Greek relations. We're not going to tell the Turks to back off and to stop flying in your airspace and sailing in your waters. He basically pressured the Greeks to find an agreement on the Cypriot issue, because, as you know, the Turks have been illegally occupying the northern part of Cyprus since 1974. Just the same line of BS propaganda. That's what Obama basically threw at Alexis Tsipras, the Greek prime minister, who is a complete incompetent buffoon, and of course he can't do anything for Greece because he's bought and paid for too by special interests. He himself is a Freemason. In October 2015, according to reports, when he was in Washington at that time, Obama initiated him into Skull and Bones with the rest of their fellow bonesmen over there. And when Obama had gone to Greece in November last year, there were also reports again that both of them participated in some type of Freemasonic, strange type of a ceremony close by the presidential palace there in Greece. So, so it's not like really, Mr. Alexis Tsipras is there to really do anything for Greece. He's there to just keep up the pretenses. That's what he's there to do. And, of course, when Obama was there, he told Tsipras that, the establishment in America did not want them to touch a case again there in Greece, a legal case called Patheas Vodafone, and it has to do with the fact that some Greek intelligence agents basically there in Greece have for years been uncovering the conspiracy against Greece, and it all started in about 2005, whereupon a top intelligence agent by the name of Kostas Aggelakis uncovered a huge fraud ring within the Greek intelligence there in Greece, where at the time George Papandreou, who would become, of course, a prime minister in 2009, who is the head of the Socialist Party PASOK, which, by the way, has destroyed Greece on all fronts for the past 40 years. He, in conjunction with the U.S. government, the State Department, and Israel, basically were pilfering information from Greek intelligence, which had to do with the secret information that the Greek prime minister receives from his staff, and of course his staff works together with Greek intelligence. Now, Greek intelligence is there to serve, of course, the government, the prime minister. But what these bastards were doing is they were stealing his information and using it basically against him. Because, of course, they had moles on the inside. They had basically their own, let's say, intelligence agents who were basically feeding them this information, which is completely, of course, illegal. And, they should be in jail, these people, but they're not. So this gentleman, Kostas Agalaikis, first uncovered this, and he basically, became a whistleblower and brought this to the attention, of course, to the heads of Greek intelligence, and nobody wanted to deal with it because, these people were in on this whole scam. And the prime minister at the time was Kostas Karamanlis, from the very famous Karamanlis family. His uncle, years prior, was Greek prime minister several times in Greece. Another total New World Order sellout. When the military junta fell in 1974, the United States government and Henry Kissinger paved the way for this guy to become the Greek prime minister at that time. And the issue, of course, with that is the fact that the U.S. government and Israel were behind the overthrow of the Greek military dictatorship at the time. And, there's been a lot of people over the years, Greeks and non-Greeks, who have said that, the military dictatorship, though, was evil because it was a military dictatorship and it oppressed, quote-unquote, the people. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because, let it be noted, Greece has only survived as a nation and as a people for thousands of years, when it had a very strong, powerful man ruling over it with a very strong military presence. Greece has only thrived under such circumstances when it was, either when it was with, of course, let's say, for example, the military generals who ruled Greece during, ancient times like Pericles or Alexander the Great, right? Of course, you had the Greek Christian Byzantine Empire, which I've mentioned many times on this broadcast, which, that lasted over 1,000 years. We ruled the world. And there was many other nations under our fold who, became, in effect, Greek when they came into the empire because they became Greek Orthodox and they also learned the Greek language. That's essentially what we did with the other nations at that time. And there were many other nations, many other peoples that came basically under the fold of the Byzantine Empire. So, that's basically real Greece. That's when the Greek people thrived and were great and accomplished great things, is when they had a system of discipline over them and they had a strong, powerful ruler over them. Nowadays, of course, in the past 40 plus years, Greece has not had that. They've had a bunch of bubbling idiots, most of which were crypto Jews. They're actually Jewish. Of course, Freemason. And, of course, they've sold out Greece to the New World Order. And that's the reason why Greece is in the situation that it is in for decades now. So, Mr. Karamanlis, as I was saying before, his uncle was the Greek prime minister. And in 1974, when the whole staging of the junta overthrow was staged, basically the CIA had already prepared for Karamanlis to go into Greece and to take over. And what was the first thing that he did? Oh, he restored, democracy for everyone. Well, here's what he did. At that time, the junta had not only built up all of Greece on all fronts economically, they bring in foreign investment. Infrastructure was built up across all of Greece. That's when basically real modern Greece came into effect. And they had the second highest economic growth rate to Japan at that time. And of course, Japan, just a few decades after World War II, was already bustling and thriving. They had the highest economic growth rate in the world at that time during this period, which was like from the 60s, late 60s on into the 70s. So the junta lasted from 1967 to 1974. And just in 6 years, they built up all of Greece on all fronts. Okay? So basically, the guy that replaced the junta, Konstantinos Karamanlis, was already prepped to take over Greece a year prior, because he had met at that time in Salzburger's mansion in Paris, France. Salzburger was the top editor of New York Times at the time. So he met in France a year prior to that with Salzburger in his mansion in France, who's a very powerful, of course, and influential person, along with Henry Kissinger, the Greek Archbishop of America, and a few other suspect types that played a role in overthrowing basically the junta. Now, there's been a lot of speculation over the years as to whether Henry Kissinger was involved in this or not, but we have now ample proof that indeed he was involved in this, and he was, of course, involved also in the invasion of Cyprus in 1974. And we even have a White House memos now where he basically admits all of this. For example, in a White House memo dated the 13th of August, 1974, he is talking with then President Ford, and they're discussing Greece and Cyprus, and Henry Kissinger tells him there's no American reason why the Turks should not have a third of Cyprus, which is says it all. And that was 1 day prior to the second invasion of the Turks into Cyprus, 1 day prior. The first invasion was, I believe it was the 23rd of July, 1974, and then the second invasion was August the 14th, 1974, okay? Just a few weeks later. And, of course, there's been many authors and journalists have written about this. There was, of course, the late, I believe it was Australian journalist, Christopher Hitchens, who wrote a lot about the crimes of Henry Kissinger, including the crime he committed in, Cyprus. So, of course, still to this day, Henry Kissinger denies any role in it. But all the proof shows that he was involved in this, along with, of course, the Great Britain. Because, as you know, Great Britain still to this day has a military base in Cyprus. So, these sinister forces paved the way for their agent, Konstantinos Karamanlis, who was also a Freemason, to basically go into Greece and take it over after the fall of the junta. And what does this guy do? Well, he brings back all the socialists and communists into Greece, the ones that were destroying Greece for years, the ones who had caused a civil war in Greece. Because if you know your history with regards to Greece's history, modern history, during World War II, not only was Greece up against, of course, Hitler and his forces, but they were also dealing with a civil war at that time. The royalists were battling, of course, the communists, and this civil war lasted up until about 1951, okay? And the communists caused a lot of damage, a lot of harm in Greece. I mean, think about it. Here you are, a Greek patriot, you're trying to save your country, let's say from, Germany. But at the same time, you're having to deal with the communists. Now, the communists, of course, as it has come out, supported Hitler at the time and the Third Reich. So, anyway, but that's another issue. But, that's basically a reality with regards to Greek history. So this guy, Kostas Karamanlis, who was supposed to be the ethnarch, okay, the huge, national leader of Greece, this great conservative leader, okay. In reality, he was an agent of basically world Judaism. He was a high-level Freemason. He introduced Greece, of course, to the New World Order when he took over in 1974. He was also a secret communist for years. And that's something that a lot of people need to come to grips in reality with, that a lot of the so-called conservatives out there in politics today, they're nothing more than agents of course, Judaism, because everyone serves the high, powerful Zionist Jews today. But they're not really conservative at all. They're communists, okay, to a degree. But, if you think about it today, there are no real conservative leaders left out there. Name one to me. Because most of the Republicans now, they agree with the Democrats on all the major issues of the day. I'm not just talking about social issues. I'm not just talking about gay fag marriage. I'm not going to call it gay marriage because the word gay, of course, is just basically cover for homosexuality, for faggots. Now, if people have qualms with that phrase, all that is just a slang term from Britain for a homosexual. And, they're not going to... Well, what you have is now you have Democrats and Republicans agreeing on issues also like abortion and so on and so forth. So the lines between, let's say, Democrats and Republicans have blurred a lot on social issues. And then, of course, you have all the big major New World Order issues. Okay, first of all, when you have Democrats and Republicans agreeing, basically, on this, on the status quo, on how our actual government works, which is a corporate private government controlled out of the Crown of London, okay, which is essentially what took place in communism for years in Russia, okay. You had an oligarchic elite, a private corporation, basically, of the Rothschilds, running the show. Well, basically you kept everyone in line at the bottom, okay? That's what communism is. And that's pretty much where we've ended up in this country. And communism, of course, has a state-run bank. Well, so do we. State-controlled education, state-controlled medicine, everything. Well, geez, so do we. So there are no real patriots left in America who want to take on the system and talk about how this whole system is based on the New World Order. It's corrupt. It's based on the tenets of the Communist Manifesto. Indeed, it is. That all our institutions are based off of the Communist Manifesto, which I just mentioned. So all the Democrats and Republicans agree on this. Do you see now where I'm taking this? If there were really any real conservatives in America, real, let's say, Republicans, or whatever they call themselves, conservatives or just normal people who know about this conspiracy, they would name all this. Okay? And we have had such people in Congress over the past 100 years or more, actually. There was Congressman James Traficant from Ohio, who for years talked about this stuff, who in 1993 in Congress, he bring up this whole issue, and he talked about how this private corporation that controls America, basically in 1933, pressured FDR to declare Emergency Banking Act, which in effect, not only did it try to, quote-unquote, save the banks, not only did it take place after the Great Depression, but it also said that every single American at that time had to begin to contract with this private government. okay, by starting to participate in the system of licensing in America, where you have to have a license for everything. Well, in effect, what that did was surreptitiously subject every American citizen under this private corporation, which is indeed what took place. So, we have had American patriots, basically talk about all this stuff, how at that time FDR subjected every American citizen surreptitiously under this private corporation, so that now we all operate under a fictional legal character, a straw man here in the society. That is not your true self, though. Your true self is supposed to be free, okay? But, of course, no one here in America now, of course, is free, until, of course, we decide to rise up and take back our government. Now, where do you see people in Congress today talking like this? Not one person, okay? So, pretty much they're all sold out. They're sold out to Israel. They're sold out to Freemasonry. End of story. So, communism is alive and well in America, folks. It wasn't, just an issue that McCarthy dealt with, basically, way back when, And just as a quick side note, at that time, McCarthy had woken up because Eustace Mullins had given him a 40-page report on the activities of communism in America. Eustace Mullins was the last protege of Ezra Pound, the great author and poet in America. But he also became one of the greatest writers in America on the New World Order. And he was very well known, okay? His top book, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, of course, still remains the number one authority on the subject, and that was published like in 1952. So, at this time in the 50s, McCarthy wakes up to communism because of Mullins. So McCarthy hires him onto his team. But see, you got to understand, too, at this time, the Jews and the government, albeit, let's say, stifled. The Jews, the powerful Jews in the society, what they were trying to do at this time, of course, is spread communism because the Jews are behind communism. Okay? The Jews, basically what they do is they ride both sides of the political fence. They act like they're liberals, but then there's a lot that are conservative. But again, as I just described to you, really, there is no such thing. So, anyway, at this time, there were powerful Jewish circles in America. There was a Jewish mafia. The Rothschilds, of course, had already come into America and started taking over institutions in cooperation with other big families here in America, like the Morgans and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. We know all this. You had also William Randolph Hearst, the big newspaper magnate who was part of their propaganda program here in America through the newspapers. It was, of course, Morgan who in 1920 started, roughly 1920, I believe it was, he started buying up all the major newspapers in America for the Rothschilds. So, but at this time, though, Jews still were looked down upon, of course, in America. People didn't like them. And they weren't as powerful as they are today, of course. So what you have here now is the Anti-Defamation League, which was formed about several decades prior, but the president at that time was Cohn. His son was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, basically, who was a very, very prominent up-and-coming attorney at that time and a virulent, supposed anti-communist and also, of course, a homosexual. With his influence, he basically got McCarthy to hire him onto his team. Now, McCarthy was naive at that time. Okay, McCarthy didn't know, how deviant this guy was. So Roy Cohn, who basically acted like he was conservative and, of course, against the communists, got McCarthy to put him on his team, but when Cohn, of course, met Mullins, he didn't like Mullins for obvious reasons. Mullins was a very sincere individual. Mullins knew about the machinations of the Jews, and, Roy Cohn didn't like him. So Roy Cohn tells McCarthy to get rid of him from his team. Okay? Now follow my line of thought here, because this is interesting. Roy Cohn tells McCarthy to get rid of him. That's what took place, unfortunately. So, what takes place? These Jews, basically, Roy Cohn and several other Jews infiltrate the committee. And basically it collapses eventually, and McCarthy is a disgraced senator. And in 1957, he dies a sudden death. And Mullins investigated his death and found out that he had been poisoned. Gee, isn't that interesting? So, years later, Mr. Roy Cohn would become a very prominent attorney, of course, in New York, with his own, offices. He would also become the head of the Jewish mafia, and he would also become Donald Trump's own mentor. Wow. Isn't that something? Yes, you heard that correctly. Donald Trump's former mentor is head of the Jewish mafia, Roy Cohn. Now, about 10 years ago, a member of my family met Eustace Mullins for the first time in his home in Virginia, in the old folks' home, actually, where he was staying in Virginia. And they hit it off. This member of my family was able to do several interviews with him. So they remained in contact, and Mullins actually ended up handing over this person the rights to all of his work, to his books and everything, and said, basically, can you continue my work? So this person really wasn't able to continue it over the years, so that's what I've been doing. So you can make the logical conclusion now that Eustace Mullins, was kicked off of McCarthy's team by the man, basically, that would later become the mentor of Donald Trump. And I, of course, later on down the road, would become the successor of Eustace Mullins. So that's an interesting side note. So, and that's, of course, one of the reasons, too, why I exposed Donald Trump. Because, for obvious reasons. It's not just, because of this issue. It's for a myriad of issues, ladies and gentlemen, because Donald Trump is the swamp. He's not going to drain the swamp. He is the swamp. Okay? Donald Trump is surrounded by very powerful Jewish interests. And, of course, he's gone back on pretty much all of his presidential promises. His pre-election promises, of course, putting Hillary Clinton in jail. And, of course, he's completely covered up Pizzagate, the big pedophile scandal that implicates, both politicians, movie stars, singers, etc., etc. He won't even touch the issue. Of course, he said he would battle the big banks like Goldman Sachs, George Soros, this and that. When in reality, he's got these people in his cabinet now. For example, Steve Mnuchin is now, of course, the Treasury Secretary. And Steve Mnuchin is a former Goldman Sachs executive and, of course, a longtime George Soros associate. Now, you have a bunch of idiots out there who are saying, oh, no, he's got to have his enemies close with him so he can study their moves. I mean, what retarded nonsense is this, honestly, seriously? What kind of twisted logic is this, that I need to make a deal with the devil so that I can basically, infiltrate his camp or glean information from him? I mean, that is such twisted logic. I can't believe people actually think that way, but it's just indicative of how hypocritical and how many, of course, how hypocritical all of these pseudo-patriots are out there who want to have their cake and eat it too. That just makes no sense. Okay? That's just a slang, like saying, I want to put the fox in charge of the chicken coop. Okay? People out there, they either need to get real or just shut up. So, anyway, going back to Greece, as I was saying before, in 74, Konstantinos Karamanlis, the pseudo-ethnarch, takes over. And he begins, of course, to bring back liberty and freedom in Greece, quote unquote. Okay? And then what you have is this period in Greece for about at least 40 years now, where you have basically pseudo-conservatives, socialists, and communists now running the show in Greece. Okay? And these idiots have destroyed the beautiful, wonderful Greece that we've always known, have basically run it into the ground, have destroyed it culturally, spiritually, religiously, and of course economically. And that's the reason why Greece is in the position it is today, is because of these fools. And so now the Greek people are faced with basically either uniting as a nation and taking back their country and going back to their of course, their roots, or keeping up the pretenses and, struggling and, trying to survive within this communist New World Order tyrannical system that's set up in Greece, being run by, indeed, a communist government that is completely sold out to Western interests. Okay? So that's the issue here. So recently, a very prominent financial think tank group out of London called Capital Economics, they came out with a report that said, this is about a couple of weeks ago, that said that, according to their estimates, in 2017, Greece will do a Grexit, which means they're going to at least leave the Eurozone, maybe even the European Union. And, of course, go back to the Jacma. And they're going to be the second nation after, of course, Great Britain to do this. That's according to Capital Economics, which is a huge, huge thing for them to say. Now, of course, we also have Donald Trump's representatives of his government saying that basically they believe that Greece will leave at least the Eurozone and go back to the Jacma. Okay? And right now, there's a lot of discussion going on between the Greek government, the IMF, and of course the rest of the Troika as to what to do with Greece's debt. And there's a lot of squabbling going on between all these sides as to what to do with the Greek debt. Okay? And the IMF basically, is saying, Greece's debt is unsustainable unless, of course, they get a haircut. Of course, Germany and the rest of Europe are saying that basically, you can't, diminish the Greek debt. You can't, do a haircut of the Greek debt. And then, of course, there's the rest of the Troika that's saying, yeah, according to an agreement with Greece, they're not allowed to get according to the original contract with Greece, the memorandum, they're not, supposed to be getting a haircut. Now, back in 2010, the IMF had offered the then Greek government of George Papandreou, okay, the guy who I mentioned earlier, who replaced Kostas Karamanlis in 2009, okay, after Karamanlis was basically overthrown. And that was basically what I wanted to say prior, and I had forgot to mention it, that during this time that these Greek intelligence agents were exposing what was going on in Greece at that time, from 2005 and on, basically they found out that the powers that be wanted to put George Papandreou in power to lead Greece into a new era, which is indeed what took place. And according to reports, the Rothschilds actually, in 2009, that Bilderberg meeting in Greece, and they told Karamanlis he would step down and then Papandreou would replace him. Okay, I kid you not. So eventually that's what took place, and Papandreou led Greece into this, period that they're in now for the past about 7 years of, economic turmoil. But anyway, in 2010, it was the then head of the IMF, Strauss-Kahn, who would suggest to Papandreou that the Greeks should take a cut in the Greek debt. He said, your debt is unsustainable. We're going to give you a cut in the Greek debt. The IMF at the time had offered it to Papandreou, okay? But Papandreou basically refused. And he made up some stupid, lame excuse like it wouldn't look good politically. Like, it was just utter insanity. So instead of Greece basically getting a haircut and taking 30 billion, they didn't get a haircut, meaning cutting their debt. And they took 110 billion, okay? And this has cost them tremendously. Now, going real quick back to 2009, Jim Tucker, the guy I had mentioned prior, he was on the Alex Jones show, okay? It's not that I like Alex Jones, it's just Jim Tucker was a good guy, and he was on the Alex Jones show many times. Now, anyway, he had said that his intelligence at that time, his information that he was gathering about the Bilderberg group that was going on in Athens, said that the IMF would change their tactics to become a lot more harsh toward other nations, okay? And that they would begin to basically take them over economically, and they would impose all these hard austerity measures and all the stuff basically that's going on in Greece today. It was decided at Bilderberg Group at that time in 2009, okay? And not just in Greece, in the Ukraine and in other nations. So, anyway, but in 2010, Strauss-Kahn tried to give them a haircut, but the Greek government wouldn't accept it. And now today, there's a lot of basically turmoil going on with Greece's finances, with the situation with their finances, over the debt. And, there are people that are talking about it, and then there are people that are saying, everyone's talking about it, but it's just, there are some that are for it and then some that are against it. And, of course, the IMF is saying, well, their debt is unsustainable without a haircut, but they're really not willing now today to give one to Greece, when in reality Strauss-Kahn tried in 2010 to give it to them, but oddly enough, the Greek government wouldn't accept it. So this bastard, George Papandreou, leads Greece into this crisis, okay, by design. It was all done by design, which I described before. And on top of it all, he doesn't even do anything to alleviate the Greek debt. Now, the Greek debt, as I've explained before and in other broadcasts, is totally, completely made up. Okay? The Greek debt and the Greek budget deficit, basically, that everyone said that Greece had back in, 2009, that was all made up by design by George Papandreou when he gave orders to his economic team, Ministry of Finance, and of course to the Greek statistical agency, Elstat. And this would be used as a pretext to put Greece under the control of the Troika, because their budget deficit would surpass basically such a limit where it would require them, let's say, where it indeed required them, this is an actual fact that took place, it would require them to take basically financial support from the Troika. This is the reason why Greece is in the situation that it is in today, because of that, basically, the manipulation of their numbers. And of course, whistleblowers out of the Greek Statistical Agency have come out since then and said that the then head of the Greek Statistical Agency, Andreas trying to remember his last name, Andreas Georgiou, okay, told them to purposely manipulate the numbers to be used basically as a pretext for Greece to go under the financial control of the Troika. It was all done by design. It was all made up. And I described to you the real reasons behind all this earlier in this broadcast. Now, this guy, Andreas Papandreou, is wanted by the Greek Justice Department. But see, there's an issue. They can't prosecute him because he's here in the United States. in Washington, D.C. You see, the U.S. government has awarded this individual for the evil that he has done to the Greeks. We're talking about a guy who was with the IMF 25 years prior, okay? The IMF, mind you. And now he's in a beautiful home in Washington, and he doesn't have to worry about extradition because the U.S. government is not willing to hand him over to the Greek government. We're talking about the guy who, in conjunction with George Papageorgiou and his government, engineered this whole crisis. If this individual, Andreas Papageorgiou, had never handed over, basically, Greece's, had never ordered his employees to manipulate the data, okay, then Greece would never have required, basically, a bailout. So, really, at this time, you have the Greek government making up this whole $300+ billion debt, along with this 4% to budget deficit. Okay, they made that all up at that time. It was all garbage. And I've reported on this. I've written a whole book about this, Hellenic Crisis, with John Contreras. By the way, if you'd like to see my personal website to learn more about me and to learn about how you can find these books, you can go to my website, johncontreras.com. That is spelled John, as in Nancy, Koun, as in Nancy, T as in Tom, OURIS.com. That's JOHNKOUNTOURIS.com. And there you can find more about me, the work that I do for Greece. My book will thoroughly enlighten you on this whole topic. You will enjoy it. Of course, there's my other book, Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization. And there you can learn about, the true history of ancient Greece. You can learn about the mysteries of the ancient Greek language. You can learn about the wider, more general conspiracy against the Greek people that has been going on, not just, let's say, the past 7 years, but actually for hundreds and hundreds of years by the powers that be. We're talking about not only the Ottoman Empire, but also the black nobility from Venice, which is basically was the proto-New World Order at that time, and that would it would eventually devolve into the New World Order system that we have today. And, of course, Henry Kissinger wrote his whole thesis in Harvard on, of course, Venice. So you can learn all that in my books. This is John Contreras signing out for Greek News on Demand. Thank you so much for listening.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to Youth Live.